Hi, everybody. So, welcome to another week of remote learning. I know this is not how we would want it to be, but I'm at least glad that we can connect still and that I can still get your reading or that I can still read your writing. I have enjoyed reading what you have been putting together, especially the longer pieces, the more thoughtful pieces, the journal entries, the poems. Reading the answers to multiple choice questions is fine, but I really have enjoyed reading the pieces where you're really thinking and giving me some of your personal thoughts. So that has been fun for me. This week, we are going to be looking at themes. I know you've been talking about themes for a really long time. I know that this wasn't the first school year you had ever talked about themes. And I know we spent time on this while we were doing the narrative unit. It really is sort of a central, important concept in English, and it isn't going away. You're going to be doing it next year in 8th grade, all through high school, and then for those of you who do go on to college, most likely take an English class, at least one English class while you're in college. And I will tell you that those of you who find the deepest, most interesting, most sort of secretive theme that has been woven into the literature and been able to prove it with quotes, you're going to have the most success. I really want you to look at literature, especially poetry, but all literature moving forward as a mystery that you are trying to find the deeper meaning of, that you're trying to use the quotes, the way that it's written, the sort of ideas that are there as clues to solving a mystery. And the mystery that you're trying to solve is, what is the theme? Can I find the most interesting, coolest, most hidden theme in that piece? That's great literature study. And then being able to prove that it's really there, that's key. So this time we are looking at different pieces of writing, mostly some pieces of art, and trying to find out what the themes in them are. And then also sometimes taking a poem and a story, or a poem and a piece of art, and trying to compare them together, see what the central idea in both pieces is, try to prove that the same theme or the same central concept is in both pieces, prove that they're there, say why we think it's there. I've noticed that a lot of people have really just been tapping out in their work. Not everybody, but some people have been just tapping out on their work the basic concept, a few words, general idea, and then not really proving it. And remember, you really need to practice finding proof, finding evidence, not just saying that it's there, but proving that it's there. I think about math class, where you're not just looking at the answer. If you just gave the answer but you didn't show your work, you wouldn't get the points. This is sort of English's version of that. Writing down what you think the theme is, nifty. Writing down what you think the theme is and proving why you think it. Finding the quotes and saying what they are that prove that theme is there. That's doing the work. So I've chosen pieces of art and literature this week that are connected to school. Because we have been out of school for so long, I wanted to make sure that I sort of had us looking at what school really should include. You live in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is consistently ranked #1, according to US News and World Reports, in education in the United States. To the point where if Massachusetts were its own country, instead of just another state, if it was treated as its own country, it would be 9th in math and 3rd in reading worldwide. It would, and then Foxborough itself would be even higher than that. I believe we'd be like the 3rd country in the world in both math and reading, if we were our own country, just Foxborough. So you guys are really, really, really fortunate education-wise, because the rest of the country ain't like that, to the point where when you factor in all the other states, we're 31st in math and 35th in reading or something like that. So we are considerably lower when you start putting the other states in. Um, Massachusetts has always valued education. We built the first public school in the Americas in 1635. The Boston Latin School still exists. It was built in 1635. Of course, at the time, they only allowed white male students and they only hired white male teachers. And there were very strict rules, and it was very hard to get into. It's still actually very hard to get into. You have to be a resident of Boston and then you have to apply, and it's a whole nother set of stuff. Um, the location of the school itself has bounced around a little bit, but they didn't let their first non-white student attend Boston Latin until the end of the 1800s, and they weren't coeducational, in meaning they didn't allow girls in until 1972. So Boston Latin School has taken a very long time from 1635 to 1972 to allow everybody to attend that school. Um, and, we really have to talk or think about what equality means and what education is. For hundreds of years in this country, we have been wondering or talking about or fighting about what a school should look like, what a school should and shouldn't teach kids, who is allowed to even go to school, how are schools paid for, um, is it fair that schools in places of the country where people are poorer have worse schools? There's so many complicated issues, and people are really arguing about these. Um, Education is always a major part of a political discussion, and this is an election year. So, education is always something that people are discussing, arguing, fighting about, because obviously everybody wants their kid to get a great education, and not everybody even has that as an option for them. So, feel very fortunate that you are where you are. So, as far as themes are concerned, themes, as you know, are three words: the author's message. That's the definition of a theme, the author's message. And it's your job to figure out what the author's message might be. Chances are you won't ever be in a place where the author will just be invited right in and you can ask that person, him or her, you can say, so what is the theme of this piece? Your goal is to try and come up with a theme that seems cool and then prove that it's there. Rule number one: themes are not main ideas. They are different than the main idea. You will always find somebody, even an adult in a college class, when the professor says, "What's a theme?" There will be someone who will go, "Well, isn't it like a main idea?" And they're wrong. It isn't a main idea. Civil rights is a main idea in some of the things that we're reading this week. Medical breakthroughs is a main idea in pretty much everything on the news and on the internet right now. And yet neither one is a theme. They're main ideas. If the main character in Crash loved playing football, football was a main idea, not a theme. So you want to make sure that you can tell the difference between what a main idea is and what a theme is. Rule number two: they are not just one word. I beat my head against the wall trying to get this to people, because really, even now, I've had questions this year, or in since remote learning. What is the theme in this piece? Blah 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 blah, and people are still answering with just one word. It can't ever just be one word. Love, death, evil, joy. They might all be in a poem or a story or a movie or a TV show or a speech or a piece of art or some music, but they can never be a theme. They are each just one word long. They're a concept, they're emotion, not a lesson. Think about it. The author is not trying to teach you what death is. The author is not trying to teach you what love is. Chances are you probably found out what love was without ever reading a book. Hopefully, most of you learned what love was before a book was ever put in front of you that you could actually read. And so the author isn't going to try and teach you what that is. The author isn't going to try and teach you what joy is. The author isn't going to try and teach you what death is. Those can never be themes. So don't just write down one word. They need to be statements, usually entire sentences. Rule number 3, they are big, broad, wise ideas about life. We're reading a story this week called The Fun They Had. The main character's name is Margie. She has never seen a book before, and she learns about what books are. Margie learned about books is not a theme. It's too specific. When you're 60 years old, you are not going to need to know if Margie learned what a book was. So anything specific to Margie can't be a theme. It has to be a deeper idea, a deeper life lesson, something that will still be a lesson you will need to learn or remind yourself or be teaching other people when you're 60 years old. And rule number 4, they are inferred. They are very, very rarely said point blank right out there. So it's really unlikely that the character is going to look at you and go, the theme is. You usually have to figure it out. In fact, part of the fun for most people who really love English, part of the fun in a poem or a story is trying to figure out what the theme is. What is the hidden meaning that the author is trying to put there, and how can I show that? It really is a form of mystery. So you need to read between the lines to try and figure out or infer what the author is trying to teach us. So for today, after you're done watching this video, today's activity has you looking at these 4 pieces of art. Now, in this slide, because of the way that it's formatted, you're only seeing a small chunk of each piece of art. In the actual activity on Teams, you can see the entire paintings. You're going to pick one of them. And there's a series of questions to ask you basically, what would you include if you were writing a poem about this painting? I'm not actually asking you to write the poem because you're already listening to me talk for about 20 minutes before you even look at the painting. So I want to make sure that I'm fair. But what I want you to do with these pieces of art is try to look specifically at the different characters. Who is turned around? Who is separated? Who is teaching? Who is the student? The 4 pieces of art that are here, up in the top left corner over there is School of Athens. I know many of you, or I know all of you, have been learning about ancient Greece and social studies. This is the Athenian school, and this is a very famous painting that's actually at the Vatican, which is where the Pope lives in Vatican City, which is surrounded by Rome and Italy. And this was painted by Raphael. Up top above me right now is Confucius to his students. Confucius is a very famous, great thinker and teacher and writer in Chinese history. This painting is about 1,500 years old. We don't know the exact year, we don't know the exact painter, but this is supposed to be Confucius teaching his students. And you can kind of see how they depicted that and how schools were run in ancient China. Bottom left over here is a painting called Norman Rockwell Visits a Country School, and it is painted by Norman Rockwell. This is what Norman Rockwell saw when he went into a country one-room schoolhouse. Norman Rockwell was a very famous painter. He painted a different sort of American image for each week of the covers of a magazine that was around at the time called the Saturday Evening Post. And then when he stopped working for the Saturday Evening Post, he started painting pieces of art for a different magazine called Look. And this painting is a painting that he made when he went to this country school and saw this teacher sitting around reading to her students. What you can't see in this one, but you'll see when you look at the big piece of art is off to the right side of the painting. There's another little girl reading all by herself. So those are all things to think about when you're trying to figure out what the school looks like, how the school is run, and what you would include if you were writing the poem and whose perspective you would write the poem from. And my face is covering this painting, which is called The Library by Jacob Lawrence. Jacob Lawrence grew up in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. So he wasn't really a Harlem Renaissance painter in that he didn't paint during the 1920s. The Harlem Renaissance, by the way, if you remember from last week, is the time period when after World War I, 300,000 African Americans moved north from the South. They move into primarily two cities, New York City and Chicago. And when the African Americans moved to New York City, they primarily moved into a neighborhood called Harlem, which is still there in Manhattan, and it is sort of one of the big hot spots for jazz and for art and literature at the time period. And Jacob Lawrence grew up surrounded by these great jazz musicians, these great Black authors and artists. And he became an African American artist who was very highly thought of. This is one of his pieces of art. And so I tried to pick four different pieces that show real different time periods, real different views and cultures. And your job is to pick one of them and try to sort of imagine what a poem might be like if you were to write from the perspective of a character in that piece of art. So because we're trying to get two pieces of literature each time and have you really compare them, it's a little more reading maybe than I would normally give you. So we're giving you some extra time each time. This assignment is for Tuesday, but it might spill over into Wednesday for you. And the poem here is by Langston Hughes, who you read last week, the Harlem Renaissance poet, and he wrote Theme for English B. English B, we have to assume, is the name of his class that he's taking at Columbia University. If you recall, when he was in college, he was basically surrounded by all white students and had all white professors in college, and felt a great deal of racism to the point where it caused him to drop out of Columbia. So this poem is sort of in response to an assignment he's being given while he's in college. Above me, you can see a chunk of a Norman Rockwell painting. We just talked about Norman Rockwell on the last slide, the guy who painted the country schoolroom. This is another painting by him called The Problem We All Live With, and it is a painting of Ruby Bridges. I know you all have studied this story, but in 1955, the United States Supreme Court ruled that you could no longer segregate schools based on race. When the Civil War ended at the end of the 1860s, clearly the only thing that really changed right away was the fact that slavery didn't exist anymore, but things were still very much separated. And in the South, what they called the Jim Crow South, there were all kinds of Jim Crow laws, laws that were meant to keep Black people from having power, proper education, success, money, equality, positions, property, any of that. So there were many, many, many very difficult laws passed. The Civil Rights Movement started breaking down those Jim Crow laws. But even though the court ruled in 1955 that segregated schools were completely unfair and that the white schools were clearly getting more than the black schools, they held out actually integrating the schools. In 1960, federal marshals had to escort Ruby Bridges into her elementary school while people threw things at her, swore at her, called her, incredibly awful names. And Norman Rockwell creates this painting to show what that was and document it for all history so that we would never forget. And I think if you're talking about Langston Hughes writing in the 1920s, and then you have Ruby Bridges in 1960 with Norman Rockwell making this painting. I think it makes us wonder sort of now that's one generation, then the next generation. Now we're one or two more generations past that. And the question is education equal yet? What is racism like today? What are schools like today? Are they really integrated? Um, these are things that our country struggles with, talks about, fights about, disagrees about all the time. And we're in an election year. You're going to hear this and what education is. So it's something to be thinking about. Um, this next slide is, since the last one was Tuesday into Wednesday, this one is really Wednesday into Thursday. The Fun They Had is a great short story by Isaac Asimov. It takes place in the future, and it imagines that this boy has found a real book in his attic from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, because everything else that they read at this time is on a screen. And they're like, so I guess when you finish reading the book, you just kind of like throw it away because you read it. And the protagonist is Margie, a little girl who has never heard or never seen a real book. And this book is all about school. And she can't believe that. And she realizes that school in this book talks about the way school was now, or at least the way it was before remote learning. What it was when we all went to a school building together and listened to a human teach us, which is different than her experience. I think her experience is more similar to what we're all going through right now. So that's why I picked the short story. The poem here by Philip Larkin is called The School in August, which describes what I think the school probably looks like right now without us there. Just so that you know, all the poems and short stories that I have this week, or almost all of them, have a link right under the title that you can click, and it brings you to a YouTube video that reads the poem or the short story to you. So if you're struggling with understanding it, you need some to hear it read to you, that's going to help you with the comprehension. And so the questions here will ask you how the Fun They Had and the School in August are similar. So this is a Wednesday into Thursday activity. On Thursday, we have an optional assignment. Since Tuesday is really a Tuesday and Wednesday is really a Wednesday and Thursday, we wanted to make the Thursday an optional assignment. I did want to just tell you that the optional assignment for Thursday has us looking at an article about a court case that just ended at the end of April. On April 30th, this article was published. It's a case that was brought in front of a federal court in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan, their schools are some of the lowest performing schools in the country. Detroit has parts of their city in particular that are poorer than most other places in the nation, and they were saying the case that was being brought to the court was, this is unfair. We are sending our kids to schools and they're not even learning how to read. And so the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which was passed shortly after the Civil War, says that, among other things, all people are to be protected equally under the law. And the idea here was that if you don't give everybody in the country at least the same basic minimum education, then a group of people is not protected under the law. And so it should be a responsibility for every school to teach every child how to read. That should be the absolute basic minimum requirement. You had kids going to school in Detroit high schools who still were not reading at a middle school reading level. And they brought it to court and they won. And now they must find a way to provide at least a basic minimum education to all students. I also included a poem by Gary Soto. He's the guy who wrote The short story, seventh grade, that we read way back at the beginning of the year about the two friends. One of them was the boy who was trying to impress the girl in French class, and the other one had that like smoldering look that he gave girls because he thought that that was going to impress them. This is a poem by that same author called "Teaching from an Old English" or old teaching English from an old composition book, and the poem itself is actually about Gary Soto teaching in a school where the kids do not speak English as their first language. So when you read that they are pretending to drink beer, or that they're drinking beer, they're not actually drinking beer. They're pretending. When they're eating steak, they're not actually eating steak. They are pretending to eat steak because they're talking about those words that they're learning in English class at a high school English class. And their books are all outdated, and these kids are, clearly having an education that they need, but they're behind where most of you are already because of the struggles and situations that they have in their schools and in their lives. And then on Friday, you have a journal write. This Friday journal write won't be due until the following Monday. So you'll have the weekend to work on this too. So everything kind of can get shifted back a bit if you need it to. Basically, you're going to pick one of these 5 themes, and you are going to write either a poem that has 60 words in it, or a paragraph that has 5 to 7 sentences in it, or more. And it is going to be based on one of these 5 themes. Theme 1, it is important to be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. I put this on there because I figured some people sit around wishing that they didn't have school anymore, and now we don't have school anymore. And so some people got their wish, but they might regret that wish. Theme number 2, education should be given equally to all. It seems like a really obvious thing. Education should be given equally to all. It's easy for us to say, except that we are benefiting being in Foxborough, in Massachusetts. Our education is clearly not equal. We're getting the better education. So what would that mean if we tried to offer equal education? It's a complicated issue. It's something for you to think about. Doesn't mean that there's a right or a wrong to this, but do you think that you guys should be getting a better education just because of where you live? It's an interesting thing, and it's something people debate about. Theme number 3, the most important lesson a person can learn is blank. You have to figure out what you think that most important lesson is, and then write from there. Theme number 4, the perfect school would blank. I'm curious, if you pick number 4, what do you think the perfect school would include? And theme number 5, it's okay to feel. And I feel like right now, a lot of people have all kinds of weird feelings, and all of them are okay. And sort of like, it's okay to feel this way because of this. The only people who are going to see what you wrote are me and Ms. Masha. So, no worries about like other students seeing what you wrote, feel free to reach out. I'm not going to share what you wrote with other people. I really want you to be able to say what's sort of in your mind. But a 60-word poem or a paragraph or more of writing. And just a reminder for announcements, I am going to post May, June extra credit. It's both months this time because June we're not together for a whole month. And all 3 writers are this month writing about parents because Mother's Day is in May, Father's Day is in June, so they are all writing about parents. Office hours, as a reminder, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. I am there to answer questions. Some of the readings are hard this week. Feel free to stop in, ask questions. I will even read pieces with you if you want me to. I will look over quotes with you. I will tell you whether or not the quote that you picked actually proves the theme that you picked or thought that you found. Please show up. I can tell you if you're right or not. Assignment submissions on Teams, as I told you guys last week, don't forget, I am doing it the correct way now, and all of your assignments are being submitted, can be submitted without having to download the whole thing and then upload the whole thing. I'm creating each of you having an editable copy on Teams for you. And then just a reminder, looking forward, not this week, not next week, but the week after, Monday, May 25th is Memorial Day. We won't be having office hours or regular school that day. All right. I hope you're all well, and I will be back here with another video next week. And until then, I hope to see you in office hours or see your thoughts on Teams about word of the day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.